Imagine waking up to find out that a civilization you never even knew existed had just wiped 12,000 of your people off the map. That's what happened to us. They called us weak, soft, and not even worth their time. They made the biggest mistake in galactic history. If you want to know how we proved them wrong, stick around. Because this story is one for the ages. The stage for our tragedy was set in a place we'd never heard of. The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council. It was a cavernous space, nearly a mile wide, with walls made of living crystal that pulsed with a soft blue glow. Hundreds of different alien species filled the seats, rising like steps in some cosmic coliseum. Some had scales, some had fur, and some were just shimmering clouds of gas in containment fields. They were all there to talk about territory, trade, and power. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Zyth Kulvan of the Valoran Dominion, a tall, thin being with gray skin pulled tight over a pointed skull. His four eyes blinked one after the other as he waited for the chamber to quiet down. A giant hologram behind him showed a small, spinning planet of blue and green floating alone in the dark. Honored members of the Council, Zyth's voice echoed perfectly. I come with a simple request. The Valoran Dominion wishes to expand into Sector 447. He explained that the sector had rich mining resources that would help the whole galaxy. A low murmur rippled through the delegates. Sector 447 was out on the galactic rim, a forgotten corner far from the main trade routes. Most of them had never even thought about it. There is, however, a small complication, Zyth went on. He tapped his wrist, and the hologram changed. Now it showed a creature standing on two legs, no scales, no claws, nothing that looked like a weapon, just soft, exposed skin and two eyes on the front of its head. This, Zyth announced, is a human. He explained they'd recently settled a world in that sector they called New Helsinki. The Denari ambassador, a tough old diplomat covered in green scales who'd survived 3 assassination attempts, leaned in. Not much surprised her anymore. "And what do you know of these humans?" she asked. Zyth smiled, revealing rows of tiny, sharp teeth. "Very little, because there's very little to know. They only figured out interstellar travel less than 100 years ago. They have no natural armor, no venom, no fangs. They have to sleep for about 1/3 of their lives and can die from a temperature change most of us would find a bit chilly." He paused, letting his words sink in. Simply put, they are one of the weakest species we've ever found. Laughter echoed through the chamber. A massive, 4-armed delegate with skin like stone slapped his knee. "And you need the Council's permission to deal with these softies?" he roared. "Just go push them aside." Zyth gave a slow nod. "That is my plan, but protocol says I have to inform you before taking military action against any spacefaring species, no matter how pathetic. I'm asking for formal approval to claim their colony and its resources. If they resist, we will unpacify them." The vote was over in seconds. One by one, the delegates approved the motion. It passed without a single objection. No one cared. The humans were too small, too weak, too far away to matter. As everyone was leaving, the Denari ambassador walked up to Zyth. "A word of caution, Ambassador," she said quietly. "I once read a file on these humans. They have a fascinating history." Zyth just waved her off. All species have history. What matters is what they can do now, and they can do nothing. The Denari ambassador looked at him for a long moment. "Perhaps," she said, "but the file mentioned something odd. On their home world, they were once prey, small and weak, just like you said, but somehow they became the planet's dominant species. They hunted creatures 10 times their size. They spread to every corner of their world. They even fought each other in wars so brutal they nearly wiped themselves out. And yet they survived. Doesn't that worry you?" Zyth just laughed. "Old stories. We've conquered 43 species. These humans will just be number 44. The Denari ambassador didn't say another word. She just turned and walked away, her scales clicking on the crystal floor. She had tried to warn him. That was all she could do. 12,000 light-years away, on a little world of forests and lakes, a 7-year-old girl named Sophia was running through her garden. She had curly dark hair and a cute little gap where her 2 front teeth used to be. She was holding a piece of paper covered in drawings. "Papa, Papa," she yelled. "Look what I made." Her father, Anders, looked up from his vegetable patch. He was a tall man with kind eyes and dirt on his hands. He'd come to New Helsinki 15 years ago with the first wave of colonists, helping build the roads, schools, and hospitals. He'd met his wife, Maria, here, and together they had built a life. "What have you got there, little one?" he asked, wiping his hands on his pants. Sophia proudly held up the drawing. It showed 4 stick figures holding hands under a big yellow sun. "It's us," she said. "That's you and Mama and baby Eric and me." Anders's heart felt like it would burst. He scooped his daughter up in a big hug. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "The most beautiful thing I've ever seen. We're definitely hanging this on the wall." From inside, Maria called out, "Dinner's ready. Come on in before it gets cold." Anders carried Sophia toward their little house as the sun set, painting the sky orange and pink. He could see the lights of the main city twinkling in the distance. 30,000 people lived on New Helsinki. It wasn't much by galactic standards, but to Anders, it was the entire universe. They all sat down for dinner. Maria had made stew with vegetables from their garden. Baby Eric was in his high chair, happily making a mess, while Sophia chattered on about her day at school. It was a completely ordinary, absolutely perfect evening. None of them saw the stars outside beginning to vanish, one by one, blotted out by massive shadows descending from the sky. The first explosion hit without any warning. The windows blew inward, and Anders instinctively threw himself over Sophia. Maria screamed, grabbing Eric from his chair as the whole house shook. Through the shattered window, Anders saw the sky filled with monstrous ships, each one bigger than any building in the city. Beams of light shot down from them, and everywhere they touched, fire erupted. "We have to run," Anders yelled, his voice somehow steady. "To the bunkers!" They ran out into pure chaos. People were screaming, crying, lost in the smoke. The ships kept firing, mercilessly. Anders saw his daughter's school collapse in on itself. He saw the hospital take a direct hit. He saw neighbors he'd known for years vaporized in a flash of light. He gripped Sophia's hand, his knuckles white, and ran faster. The bunker was just 3 blocks away. They were so close. He could see the entrance, other families rushing inside. Just a few more steps. That's when the light hit them. Anders felt nothing. 1 second, he was running, holding his daughter's hand. The next, there was only blackness. The very last thing he saw was Sophia's drawing, still clutched in his other hand, the 4 stick figures forever holding hands under their happy yellow sun. The attack lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 12,000 human beings were dead. New Helsinki was a smoking ruin. Valoran soldiers walked through the rubble, finding very few survivors. From the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Torv watched the devastation with a smug smile. The operation was perfect. No resistance, no Valoran casualties. The humans died just as easily as they'd expected. "Send a message to Earth," he commanded. "Tell them their colony is now ours. They have 1 month to surrender all their other colonies and bow to our rule. If they refuse, this is what awaits them." His officer nodded and got to work. Admiral Torv went to his quarters, feeling pleased. It had been a long but successful day. Soon the humans would either be their subjects or they would be extinct. Either way was fine with him. He never bothered to learn the names of the people he had murdered. They were just numbers, statistics on a report. He didn't know about Anders, Maria, or baby Eric. He didn't know about Sophia's drawing. He didn't know that a rescue team, sifting through the ashes of New Helsinki, would find that very drawing, somehow untouched by the fire. They'd find it clutched in the skeletal remains of a father's hand, and they would weep. He didn't know any of this, but he was about to learn. On Earth, the message arrived at 3:47 a.m. Within minutes, every government on the planet knew. Within hours, the entire world was watching the same horrifying images. Imagine seeing the smoking ruins of a city that was thriving just yesterday. Imagine the news reports flashing images of alien ships, impossibly huge, hanging in the sky. Then imagine the number: 12,000 dead. Not soldiers, but farmers, teachers, doctors. Entire families wiped out in the blink of an eye. The world reeled in shock, but that shock quickly hardened into something else. At the United Nations, in the biggest meeting in history, old enemies sat shoulder to shoulder. All the petty squabbles and ancient hatreds vanished, burned away by a single shared tragedy. And when the alien demand was read out loud, surrender or be annihilated, the room fell dead silent. Then, a single bitter laugh cut through the quiet. It wasn't a sound of joy. It was the cold, sharp laugh of someone who has just been pushed too far. It was the sound that comes right before a fight. Another voice joined in, then another, until the entire chamber was filled with a roaring, defiant laughter that shook the very walls. Lifelong adversaries, men and women whose nations had fought for generations, were now laughing together. They laughed at the sheer nerve of these invaders. They laughed at the idea that humanity, after everything it had survived, would simply roll over. When the noise finally faded, the Secretary General stood up. Her voice was steady as steel. "I think our answer is obvious." The vote wasn't even close. It was unanimous. The reply was beamed back through the very same channel the aliens had used. It carried just one word, translated into every language known to man: no. Aboard his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Torvex stared at the message in disbelief. "Just a single word?" he asked his communications officer. "That's it? No counter-proposal? No desperate pleas for mercy?" The officer shook his head. "Nothing else, Admiral. Just no." Torvek's brow furrowed. This was all wrong. Conquered races were supposed to grovel. They were supposed to bargain, to offer up their treasures, their planets, anything to save their own skins. They weren't supposed to just say no. Maybe they don't grasp the gravity of their position, he finally decided. Send another message. Spell it out for them. Let them know exactly what we will do to their other planets if they continue this foolishness. The detailed threat was sent. Less than an hour later, the reply came back. It was exactly the same. No. A cold knot of unease began to form in Admiral Torvex's stomach. Something was fundamentally wrong here. His intelligence reports described humans as a weak, divided, primitive species. They should have been terrified. They should have already surrendered. So why weren't they? He couldn't know it then, but he had just made the single greatest blunder of his entire decorated career. He had picked a fight with a species that had forgotten how to give up. He had murdered their young, and by doing so, he had woken a sleeping giant. All across Earth, factory assembly lines were grinding to a halt, only to be reborn with a new purpose. In labs, scientists were sketching out blueprints for weapons of vengeance. And in military bases around the globe, recruits were already starting their training. Humanity wasn't getting ready to talk. It was getting ready for a war. And the galaxy was about to learn a terrible lesson. When humanity truly goes to war, there is nothing more frightening. The Valorans may have started this conflict, but humanity was going to end it. In a quiet office in Geneva, a woman named Elena Vasquez gazed at a hologram showing the fires of New Helsinki. She was the one chosen to lead humanity's unified military. She was a veteran of 3 wars and had a perfect record, but this felt different. This wasn't country against country. This was a fight for the very existence of her species. In front of her was a data slate holding the face of every single person who had died. She had made herself look at every last one. She learned their names, committing them to memory. It was a silent vow she made to herself, to carry their memory with her always. But one picture held her gaze. It was a little girl with a wild mess of dark curls and a goofy, gap-toothed grin. Her file said her name was Sophia. She was 7 years old. Her favorite thing to do was draw pictures of her mom and dad. Elena gently touched the image on the screen. "I promise you, little one," she whispered to the ghost in the machine. "They will answer for this. Every last one. I will see to it." As the sun came up outside her window, the gears of humanity's rage began to turn across the entire planet. Retired warships, sleeping in orbital graveyards, were being brought back to life. Weapons once outlawed by international treaty were being hastily reassembled. Recruitment offices in every city on every continent were swamped with volunteers. The Valorans thought they were kicking a sleeping dog. They were about to find out they had kicked a hornet's nest the size of a planet. The change that swept over Earth was breathtakingly fast. Within 72 hours, the Global Emergency Coalition was a reality. Countries that were on the brink of nuclear war just a month ago were now openly sharing their most advanced military tech. Factories that once produced cars and smartphones went dark for a few hours, then roared back to life, churning out armor plating and plasma cannons. Nobody argued. Nobody debated. Politics were a luxury they could no longer afford. 12,000 people were gone, and a single primal thought echoed in every human mind: revenge. From the heart of the new Global Command Center, Elena Vasquez watched the world rearm itself on dozens of holographic screens. Each display was a testament to humanity's singular focus. Weapons produced, warships launched, soldiers ready. The numbers just kept ticking up, faster and faster. "Status report," she said to her aide, a young captain named Torres who looked like he hadn't seen a bed in 3 days. Torres glanced at his data slate, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion, but his voice firm. "We're at 93% conversion of all heavy industry. 14 orbital shipyards are active, with another 12 set to come online by week's end. We've had 47 million volunteers sign up," he continued. "We can only fast-track about 2 million for combat, but the rest are already working in the factories and support lines." Elena gave a slow, deliberate nod. "And our research and development?" "Moving faster than we projected, ma'am. The science teams are living on caffeine and sheer will. They think they've found a way to boost our plasma cannon output by 60%, and engineering has a new armor composite they claim can take a direct hit from a Valorant energy weapon." Elena stared at him. How is that even possible? Torres gave a tired, grim smile. "They aren't sleeping. None of them. They say sleep is for after the war." Elena studied her aide for a moment, truly seeing the exhaustion etched on his face and the faint tremor in his hands from lack of sleep. It was the same look she saw on everyone lately. An entire species running on nothing but fumes of rage and sorrow. It shouldn't have been possible. Basic biology said they should all be collapsing from burnout. People needed rest. They needed to process the horror, but no one stopped. No one could. Because every time their eyelids felt heavy, they saw the faces of the 12,000 dead. They pictured the children like Sophia, whose futures had been stolen. They remembered the families torn apart forever. And that memory was like a shot of adrenaline, pushing them onward. This was the critical factor the Valorans had missed in their calculations. They had measured human capabilities under normal circumstances. They had never considered what would happen when you pushed humanity past its breaking point. They hadn't factored in pure, undiluted rage. Back on the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Torvex was becoming genuinely worried. 2 weeks had passed. He should have received a surrender by now. Instead, all he got was dead silence. His reconnaissance drones reported a flurry of activity in the human star system, but they couldn't get a clear look. Any probe that got too close simply vanished. "I want a complete workup on this species," he barked at his chief science officer, a methodical female named Sethix. "Everything you can find. Their biology, their psychology, their entire history. Something doesn't add up, and I need to know what it is." For 3 straight days, Sethix buried herself in the Valoran archives, pulling every scrap of data they had on the creatures called humans. When she finally delivered her findings, Admiral Torvex found himself wishing he had never asked. "Admiral, our initial assessment of the humans was incomplete," she started, her voice cautious. "They come from a planet with high gravity and brutal weather patterns. They are not the most powerful creatures on their world, nor are they the quickest. They rose to the top through 2 very unusual survival strategies." She activated a hologram, showing a group of early humans relentlessly jogging after a much larger, faster beast. The first is what they call persistence hunting. A human can't outrun its prey, but it can outlast it. They will literally chase an animal for hours or even days without stopping, until the creature simply drops dead from exhaustion. Their entire biology is built for endurance, not for sprints. Torvex shifted in his command chair, a strange feeling creeping over him. And the second strategy? A new image appeared. A circle of humans around a campfire, clutching primitive weapons, staring into the menacing dark. Unusually strong pack bonding, they formed deep, almost fanatical emotional bonds within their social groups, which pushes them to incredible acts. When their pack is in danger, they will fight past the point of total physical collapse. They will throw their own lives away to protect the group. They will hunt down a threat relentlessly, no matter the cost, until it is utterly destroyed. Torvex considered this. Fascinating. But this loyalty would only extend to their immediate kin, surely. We destroyed a remote colony, not their home. Sethix took a deep breath. That, Admiral, is the critical miscalculation. Their concept of a pack is not limited to blood relations. It expands to their friends, to their cities, to their nations, even to abstract ideas. She looked him directly in the eye. When we burned New Helsinki, they did not perceive it as an attack on 12,000 colonists. In the mind of every human alive, we declared war on their entire pack. "The whole species? Are you certain?" the Admiral asked. "Yes, Admiral. Every human alive now believes they are under attack. Every single one sees us as a threat to their family. But it gets worse." Sethix brought up a new screen filled with brain scans and chemical data. Under extreme stress or rage, human bodies flood with unique chemicals. These compounds block pain and fear. They let humans go without sleep for days on end. They boost their strength, speed, and aggression to levels far beyond their normal limits. Admiral Torx just stared at the numbers. "Are you telling me that by attacking them, we've made them more dangerous?" "In a way, yes. Normally, humans are quite fragile, but when they feel threatened, especially when their children are in danger, they completely change. Their own history is full of stories where a single human performed some impossible feat of strength when their child was at risk. Lifting vehicles that should be impossible to move, fighting through wounds that should have killed them, pushing on long after their bodies should have given out. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he asked the one question that had been nagging him since the start of the briefing. What happened to the other predators on their home planet, the ones bigger and stronger than them? Sethix looked at him with an expression that looked a lot like fear. The humans killed them, Admiral. Every single one. Humans drove every major predator on their world to extinction, and it wasn't just for food. Their history shows they would deliberately target any creature that threatened their towns and hunt them until not one was left. They even have a specific word for this. And what word is that? Revenge. For the first time in his long life, Admiral Torvex felt a chill. He had led fleets against 43 different species. He'd faced enemies who were faster, stronger, and better armed than his own Valorans. He'd beaten them all. But he had never faced an enemy quite like this. An enemy you couldn't scare. An enemy that refused to quit. An enemy that would chase him across the galaxy for years or decades, or even generations until he was utterly destroyed. "How long do we have before they strike back?" he asked. Kuthix ran the numbers. "Based on their industrial power and what we're seeing now, I'd say 6 months at the very least, maybe up to a year." "Good. That gives us time to prepare. With all due respect, Admiral, I don't think you're getting it." Sethix pulled up one last image. It was a graph showing human industrial production over the last 2 weeks. The line shot straight up at an angle that seemed impossible. This is their manufacturing rate. They're building weapons faster than any species we've ever recorded. They're running factories around the clock. They are turning their entire civilization into a war machine at a pace that should be totally unsustainable. No, it isn't. But these aren't normal times for them. They aren't sleeping, Admiral. They aren't taking breaks. They're barely even eating. And the scariest part is, they don't seem to care. Their own bodies are breaking down from the strain, and they just don't care. They will keep this up until they either wipe us out or die trying. Admiral Torv shot to his feet. "That's enough. Set up defensive lines throughout our territory. Double the scout patrols. I want to know the second the humans make a move toward our space." "Yes, Admiral." As Sethix exited, Torvex walked over to the viewport in his quarters and gazed at the starfield. Somewhere out there, across that vast dark void, an entire species was getting ready to hunt him. He'd expected an easy win, a simple takeover of a weak system, just another victory for the Valoran Empire. He was slowly realizing he had made a catastrophic error. Back on Earth, Elena Vasquez was speaking to all of humanity. She stood before a camera at the Global Command Center, flanked by screens showing fleet movements and production numbers. Behind her was a single powerful image, the drawing Sophia had made of 4 stick figures holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. It was found in the rubble of New Helsinki and had become the symbol of the war. Her message was being broadcast live to every screen on Earth, on every device that could get a signal. "Citizens of Earth," she began, her voice perfectly calm and steady. "Citizens of every human colony, you all know why I'm here. You know what they did to our people on New Helsinki. You know what the Valorans are demanding from us." She paused, letting her words hang in the air. "They believe we're weak. They expect us to surrender. They think we'll get on our knees and beg to be their slaves to avoid being wiped out. They've looked at our bodies and called them fragile. They've measured our technology and called it primitive. They've looked at us and seen nothing but prey." Her expression hardened. "They are wrong." She turned slightly, pointing at the production charts behind her. "In just 2 weeks, we've accomplished what should have taken us years. We have brought our entire species together as one. We have retooled our industries. We have built weapons, ships, and armor that will make the Valorans curse the day they ever heard our name. And we are just getting started." She looked back into the camera. "Some of you are in factories right now, building the tools that will bring justice for New Helsinki. Some of you are training for the fight ahead. Some of you are looking after the children and families of those who have already left for the war. Every single one of you has a job to do, and every single one of you is doing it." She moved closer to the camera, her voice becoming softer, more personal. "I know you're exhausted. I know you're heartbroken. I know there are nights when you lie awake and wonder if we can actually pull this off. If we can truly face an empire that has conquered 43 species without a single loss." She then gave a smile, but it was a cold, terrifying smile. "Let me tell you something about those 43 species. They gave up. They saw the Valoran fleet, they ran the numbers, and they decided that fighting back wasn't worth the price. They chose to save their own skin over their pride, over their freedom." She slowly shook her head. "We are not like them. We have never been like them. When something threatens our family, we don't calculate the odds. We don't worry about the cost. We don't surrender. We fight. We fight until we win, or until there's no one left to fight. That is who we are. It's who we've always been." She gestured to the drawing behind her. Sophia was 7 years old. She drew this for her father on the very last day of her life. 4 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. A family. Her family. One of 12,000 families the Valorans wiped out. Her voice trembled for just a moment, the first crack in her armor of composure. "We will remember them. Every last one. We will carry their names with us into battle. We will say them aloud before every fight. And when we finally stand victorious over the Valorian dominion, we will make damn sure the galaxy never forgets what happened here." She stood up straighter, regaining her composure. "The Valorans wanted a war. They figured it would be easy. They figured we would break." She leaned into the camera one last time. "They have no idea what they've just unleashed. They came after our children. They slaughtered our families. And now they are about to find out what humanity does to anything that threatens the ones we love." She stepped away. "We are coming for them. With every ship, every soldier, and every weapon we can make. We will not stop. We will not rest. We will not forgive." Her final words rang out across every human settlement in the galaxy. They wanted a war. Well, now they've got one. And when it's all over, the galaxy will learn that humanity is not the prey. We are the predators. We always have been. And the Valorans just painted a target on their own backs. The broadcast cut out. Across all of human space, in factories, in training grounds, in shipyards, people watched in total silence. Then, all at once, they got back to work. The hum of machinery grew louder. The weapons were assembled faster. The ships left the dock sooner. Humanity was wide awake, and it was starving for payback. On his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Torx watched the human broadcast with a rising sense of dread. He'd seen war speeches before. He'd watched other species try to rally their people against the Valoran Empire. But he'd never seen anything remotely like this. There was no desperation in the human commander's voice, no fear, just cold, hard certainty. And that child's drawing behind her. Those 4 simple figures holding hands under a yellow sun. The Valorans had snuffed out thousands of families just like that one, and in doing so, had given the humans their ultimate symbol to rally behind. "Admiral," his communications officer said nervously, Should we issue a response? Maybe if we offered them a truce, started negotiations." Torv slowly shook his head. "You heard her. They don't want to negotiate. They don't care about a truce. They only want one thing." "What's that, Admiral?" Torvex looked away from the screen, his 4 eyes filled with worry. "Us. They want us. Every Valoran who had anything to do with the attack on New Helsinki, every commander who signed off on the operation, every soldier who pulled a trigger. He sank into his command chair, the weight of it all hitting him. And I'm starting to believe they won't stop until they get every last one of us. The bridge fell silent. Out in the blackness of space, the human war machine kept grinding away. Ships were being finished, weapons were being tested, soldiers completed their training and readied themselves for battle. The Valorans may have started this war, but it was becoming terrifyingly clear that the humans were going to be the ones to finish it. The first hint that something was terribly wrong came at 0300 hours station time. Cathris 7 was a small mining outpost at the edge of Valorian space, home to about 3,000 workers and 500 soldiers. The asteroid it was built on was rich with the rare minerals that fueled the Valoran war machine. It was supposed to be a cakewalk, a quiet post miles away from any real fighting. Private Venth was standing guard when the world went black. 1 second, the corridor was lit up and sterile. The next, it was plunged into a darkness so absolute he felt like he was drowning in it. Venth fumbled for his comms unit, but it was just a dead piece of plastic in his hand. His weapons targeting system was down. Even the emergency strips on the floor, designed to glow automatically, were dark. "Control," he hissed into the suffocating silence. "Control, you read me?" Nothing. Venth froze, straining his ears. His species came from a world of twilight, so his eyes adjusted quicker than most. Slowly, shapes began to emerge from the void, the walls, the floor, the ceiling, and something else, a figure standing at the far end of the hall, tall, two-legged, and perfectly, unnervingly still. "Identify yourself!" Venth shouted, his voice cracking as he aimed his useless rifle. The figure didn't move a muscle. Venth forced himself to take a step. Every instinct screamed at him to stay put, to wait for backup, but he knew no one was coming. The comms were out. He was on his own. He took another step, and the figure vanished. Venth blinked, confused. He'd only glanced away for a split second, but the corridor was completely empty again. Just shadows and a deep, humming silence. And then he heard it. A whisper right next to his ear, breathing words he couldn't possibly understand in a language he'd never heard before. "For Sophia." Something slammed into him from behind, and Private Venth's world ended. Commander Yethix was buried in supply manifests when the alarms finally blared to life. It had taken nearly a full hour for anyone to realize something was terribly wrong. By then, the damage was done. "Report," he boomed, striding onto the command deck. "What is going on?" His communications officer looked up, his eyes wide with pure terror. "We've lost all contact with 17 guard posts, sir. The power grid is down in sectors 4 through 12. The officer swallowed hard. "And we're finding bodies, Commander." Yethix felt a chill crawl up his spine. "How many?" 43 so far. All of them. They were killed silently. No blaster fire, no signs of a fight. They were just gone. 43 of his soldiers, taken out without a single shot fired on what was supposed to be the most secure station in the sector. Do we have any idea who did this? The security feeds are all offline, but we managed to pull a few seconds from a single camera. The officer hit a key, and a grainy hologram flickered into existence. Yethix leaned in, squinting at the dark image of a corridor. 2 of his Valoran guards were at their posts, rifles at the ready. Then, a blur of motion erupted from the shadows behind them. It moved so fast it was barely there. 2 swift, silent movements, and both guards crumpled to the floor. The figure paused, turning to look straight into the camera. It was a human. Its face was smeared with dark paint, streaks of black and green that made it a ghost in the dim light. Its eyes were like chips of ice. The human lifted a hand towards the camera, making a sign that Yethix didn't recognize. Then the feed cut out. "How many are we dealing with?" Yethix demanded. "We don't know for sure, Commander. Our sensors are shot." The officer hesitated, looking down at his console. "But based on the pattern of the attacks, we think there might be as few as 12. 12? Yethix thought he'd misheard. 12 humans did all of this. "These aren't regular soldiers, Commander. They're moving through this station like phantoms. They're not using the main corridor or HFYs. They're in the maintenance shafts, the ventilation ducts, places we barely knew were there." He paused again. "And they what?" Yethix snapped. "They don't stop, sir." "We've hit them. We have confirmed plasma burns on some of them, but they just keep fighting. One of them took a direct hit to the shoulder and kept moving for another 6 hours. The only reason we know is because we found the blood trails, human blood, but no bodies. They take their wounded with them." Yethix slumped into his command chair, the weight of it all hitting him at once. This wasn't a battle he understood. This was something else. These humans weren't following any known rules of engagement. They were fighting like predators, like they were on a hunt. And he was just beginning to realize that on this station, his Valorans were the prey. Sergeant Maria Chen slipped through the darkness, a ghost in the machine. She'd been on Kethra 7 for 16 hours. 16 hours. No sleep, no food, no rest. Her shoulder was a searing knot of pain where the plasma bolt had clipped her, but she'd slapped a medical seal over it and pushed on. There would be time for rest later. There would be time to heal when the job was done. For now, there was only the mission. Her squad was composed of the first to volunteer, special forces, the absolute best humanity had to offer. They'd spent years training for this, to fight in the dark, to kill without a sound, to be whispers in the enemy's ear. But training was one thing. This was real. Maria froze at a junction, listening. The station's silence had become a language to her, and she could hear things no one else would notice. Footsteps. Distant, Valorant footsteps, clumsy and loud. She gave a silent hand signal to her team, 2 fingers pointing left. "Move quiet. Take them out." They obeyed without a whisper. 3 shadows melted into the darkness, closing in on the enemy patrol from every direction. The Valorans never had a chance. Maria stepped over the fresh corpses without a second glance. She'd stopped seeing them as people hours ago. They were just targets now, obstacles standing between her and her objective. Deep in the back of her mind, a voice recited a list of names, not the Valorans she was killing. Other names: Sophia, Anders, Maria, Eric, 12,000 names scrolling through her memory on an endless loop. Before every mission, each soldier watched the recording. It showed the faces, one by one, of every man, woman, and child who died on New Helsinki. Every single soldier had to memorize at least 100 names, to carry them into the fight, to speak them before they took a life. Maria had memorized all 12,000 of them. "For Sophia," she whispered again, the sound lost in the hum of the station. The names were her fuel. They were what pushed away the exhaustion, the pain, and the fear. They were the constant reminder of why she was here, of why she had to keep going when her body was screaming to quit. She wasn't just a soldier, she was an echo. She was carrying the voices of the dead, and she wouldn't rest until their message had been delivered. High in orbit, above Kethra 7, the real war was kicking off. Admiral Torv had sent an entire fleet to lock down the mining outpost the moment he heard about the infiltration. 30 warships, more than enough to obliterate any human fleet that dared to show its face. But the humans didn't play by the rules. The first attack came from an asteroid field that scanners had already cleared as safe. No ships, no energy readings, just rock and dust. Then, with no warning at all, the rock started to move. "Evasive maneuvers!" the Valoran fleet commander shrieked. "All ships, evasive maneuvers, now!" It was too late. The humans had spent weeks hollowing out the asteroids and packing them with explosives. They had nudged them into a perfect attack trajectory so slowly that Valoran sensors had dismissed them as simple orbital drift. 3 capital ships vanished in the initial fireballs. That's when the human fleet finally appeared. They were outnumbered, with only 20 ships to the Valorans' remaining 27. By any standard tactical math, the Valorans should have mopped the floor with them. But the humans threw the math book out the airlock. Their ships flew in chaotic patterns that defied all logic. They ignored defensive formations, taking risks that were nothing short of suicidal. One human destroyer, its weapons fried and its hull glowing red, turned and plunged directly into the hangar bay of a Valoran carrier. The explosion tore both ships apart. "They're insane," the Valoran commander whispered in disbelief. "They're completely and utterly insane." But he was wrong. The humans weren't insane. They were just playing by a different set of rules, rules that said winning was more important than living, rules that said every single dead Valoran was worth any cost. The battle raged for 4 hours. When the smoke cleared, both fleets were shattered. The Valorans had lost 18 ships. The humans had lost 15. On any normal scorecard, it would have been a draw. But the humans didn't see it that way. They saw that they had gone toe-to-toe with a bigger force and hadn't broken. They saw they had inflicted more damage than they had taken. They saw that the Valorans could bleed, and that was all they needed to know. Admiral Torv got the news alone in his private quarters. 18 ships gone. Kothras 7 was a lost cause, and now reports were flooding in from all across Valoran territory of similar attacks. Small, elite human teams hitting stations, ambushing supply convoys, sabotaging infrastructure. They weren't trying to capture territory. They were trying to bleed the Valoran war machine dry, one cut at a time. And it was working. Torv pulled up a star chart of their space. Dozens of red dots now peppered the map, each one marking a confirmed human attack. They had hit everywhere at once, stretching the Valoran fleet so thin that a concentrated defense was impossible. "How can they be doing this?" he murmured to the empty room. "How can they fight on this many fronts at the same time?" Deep down, he knew the answer, even if he didn't want to admit it. The humans weren't fighting as scattered units. They were fighting as a single entity. Every ambush, every raid, every battle was perfectly coordinated. Information was flowing between their forces instantly. They were adapting their strategy on the fly, countering Valoran moves before his own commanders even knew they were making them. It was as if the entire human race had become one single, relentless hunter, and the Valorans were its prey. Torv opened a file Yethix had sent him weeks ago, a file on an ancient human hunting technique. A technique called persistence hunting, where primitive humans would chase their prey for days on end, without stopping, without resting, until the animal simply collapsed and died from pure exhaustion. This wasn't a war of glorious battles anymore. The humans had changed the rules. They weren't aiming for one big, decisive victory. Instead, they were bleeding the Valorans dry, hitting their supply lines, smashing their infrastructure, and forcing them to run and run until they collapsed from sheer exhaustion. And the terrifying part? It was working. Valoran soldiers were starting to crack, not from the combat, but from the constant, gnawing dread. They had no idea where the humans would strike next. Every shadow could hide an assassin. They slept with one eye open, flinching at every strange noise. The humans had turned this war into a hunt, and the Valorans were finally learning what it felt like to be the prey. Aboard the human flagship Remembrance, Elena Vasquez looked over the latest field reports with a grim sense of accomplishment. The war had raged for 8 months straight, 8 months of relentless fighting, unending pressure, and heartbreaking losses. Human casualties were piling up. They were losing ships faster than they could build new ones. Resources were stretched thin, but they were winning. Admiral Chen's fleets had locked down the C3 sector. Captain Torres reported, "We've completely severed the Valorant supply chains. Their fleet is falling back into defensive formations." Elena gave a sharp nod. "The ground teams are on schedule. We've taken back 3 mining colonies and leveled 4 of their military bases. Valorant morale is in a freefall. We're seeing more and more of their soldiers surrender." "It's not enough," Elena said, her voice barely a whisper. Torres gave her a confused look. "Ma'am?" "It's not enough," she repeated. "Surrenders won't bring back our dead. Blown-up ships won't rebuild New Helsinki. This war needs to end. For good." She activated a holographic map of Valorant territory. In the very center, a single planet pulsed with a soft purple glow. Valoria Prime, their homeworld, the heart of their entire civilization. As long as that world stands, they will never stop. They'll build new fleets, train new soldiers, and they will come for us again. Torres swallowed hard. "You're suggesting an invasion of their homeworld." "I'm suggesting we finish this," Elena corrected him, turning to face him directly. "I have no desire to kill civilians or erase their culture. I just want to guarantee they can never, ever threaten humanity again." Her eyes became hard as steel. "And if they refuse to surrender, then we will fight until they have no choice. No matter how long it takes, no matter the cost, we will not stop until this is over." She turned back to the star map. "Start drawing up plans for the final assault. I want a complete strategy on my desk within the month. I want every ship, every soldier, every single resource we have accounted for. We are going to hit them with everything we have." "Yes, ma'am." Torres saluted and left to carry out her orders, leaving Elena alone on the bridge, staring at the glowing image of Valoria Prime. Clutched in her hand was a small, folded piece of paper. It was a child's crayon drawing of 4 stick figures holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. She'd kept it with her since the war began. The paper was worn soft and creased from being handled so often, but the picture was still perfectly clear. "Almost there," she whispered to the drawing. "Almost there." Out in the endless night of space, the human war machine ground forward. Ships maneuvered into attack positions. Soldiers readied themselves for the last great battle. The net around Valorant space grew tighter with each passing day. The hunt was nearly finished, and the prey had no place left to hide. In the Galactic Council chamber, you could hear a pin drop. Ambassador Zyra Kulvan stood in the middle of the room, in the exact same spot where, 2 years ago, he had demanded permission to attack the humans. But today, everything was different. His normally gray skin looked pale and sick. His 4 eyes were bloodshot from sleepless nights. His official robes, once immaculate, were now wrinkled and stained. He looked like an animal that had been cornered. "Honored members of the council," he started, his voice cracking with strain. "I stand before you today to beg for your help. The Valoran Dominion is facing a danger beyond anything we have ever known. The humans must be stopped." A low murmur spread through the assembled delegates. They all knew the stories. They had all seen the battle reports. For 2 years they had watched from the sidelines as the Valoran Dominion was systematically torn to pieces. The Denari ambassador leaned forward, the light glinting off her green scales. "Ambassador Zyra, perhaps you could refresh the Council's memory on how this conflict started." Zyra's face contorted in anger. "That's not important right now. What's important is that the humans are pushing toward our homeworld. Their fleet gets bigger by the day while ours dwindles. They fight with no mercy, no hesitation, and no concern for their own lives. No mercy, the Denari ambassador repeated slowly. No hesitation. Those are interesting words, Ambassador. Tell me, how would you describe your own attack on New Helsinki? The chamber went completely still. Zyra was frozen. He knew exactly what she was doing. She was forcing him to face the one truth he had spent 2 years running from. It was the same truth everyone else in this room already understood. That was different, he finally choked out. That was a military operation. A strategic necessity. A military operation? The Denari ambassador's voice was ice. Against civilians, against families, against children? We didn't know. You didn't care, she shot back, her words slicing through the silence. You saw a weaker species on a planet you wanted, so you decided to just take it. You murdered 12,000 people, including infants, and you actually expected them to surrender. You were wrong. She rose to her feet, her scales making a soft clicking sound. Every species in this chamber has read the intelligence files on humans. We know who they are. We know what they're capable of. Most of us made the choice to stay out of their territory precisely because we understood how dangerous it would be to provoke them. She pointed a long, scaled finger at Zyra. You were warned. I warned you myself, in this very room. 2 years ago, I told you that humans have a unique history. I told you they had hunted every single major predator on their home planet to extinction. You laughed off my concerns. You said they were just old stories. How was I supposed to know? You were supposed to listen, the Denari ambassador's voice boomed through the chamber. You were supposed to think before you acted. You were supposed to consider that a species that had already conquered its own world might be a little more dangerous than you assumed. She sat down heavily, trying to regain her composure. I have no sympathy for you, Ambassador. None of us do. You started this war, and now you want us to come and finish it for you. We will not. We cannot, because we know that if we help you, we'll be next. The Korvathi delegate, a massive four-armed being who had once laughed at the very idea of humans being a threat, spoke up. She's right. We've studied their history. These humans, they once had a war among themselves that resulted in 70 million of their own kind being killed. 70 million, and they kept fighting. They never gave up. They never surrendered. They just kept killing each other until one side was completely annihilated. He shook his enormous head. They are not like us. They're not like any species we've ever met. They don't fight for land or for resources. They fight for ideas, for feelings, for revenge. And there is nothing in this galaxy more dangerous than a creature that is fighting for revenge. Zyra looked frantically around the room. There has to be something you can do, some way to make them stop. If the Valoran Dominion falls, they won't stop with us. They will come for all of you next. The chamber was silent as they considered his plea. Finally, the eldest ambassador spoke. He was an ancient being, his body floating in a life support tank. He had seen a dozen empires rise and fall. You misunderstand, Ambassador. The humans are not coming for us. They are coming for you. They have made it perfectly clear that their war is with the Valoran Dominion and only the Valoran Dominion. They've even sent diplomatic communications to several of us, promising that they have no hostile intentions toward any species that did not take part in the attack on New Helsinki. Diplomatic communications? Yes, quite professional, in fact. They explain their position, their objectives, and their conditions for peace. They stated that they have no interest in conquest. They don't want an empire. All they want is justice for their dead. Zyra felt like the floor was about to give out from under him. And you believe them? We studied them. We watch their actions. And yes, we believe them. Humans are not like us. They don't chase power just for the sake of having it. They simply want to be left alone. Unfortunately for you, you didn't leave them alone. You attacked their children, and now you have to face the consequences. The Denari ambassador spoke one last time. There is something you need to understand, Ambassador. Something that might help you see why we refuse to get involved. Humans have an old saying. They say there is nothing more ferocious than a parent protecting their child. She paused for effect. Right now, every single human in the galaxy sees themselves as a parent of New Helsinki. Those 12,000 dead are their children, all of them. Every soldier who fights, every factory worker who builds their weapons, every leader who plans their strategy, they all carry those names in their hearts. They chant them like prayers before a battle. They paint them on the hulls of their ships. They tattoo them onto their skin. Her voice dropped to a chilling whisper. You didn't just kill 12,000 people, Ambassador. You created 12,000 martyrs, and the humans will never, ever forget them. Not in 100 years, not in 1,000. They will remember New Helsinki until the day their species dies out, and as long as they remember, you will never be safe. Zyra stood alone in the center of the great chamber, surrounded by species that had once respected and even feared the Valoran Dominion. But now, they looked at him with an expression far worse than hatred. They looked at him with pity. "Isn't there anything you can do?" he pleaded, his voice a strained whisper. The Thiazian ambassador took a long moment to think. "We can give you some advice," he said finally. "Surrender. Give the humans whatever they're asking for. Cooperate completely with their investigation into the attack on New Helsinki. Turn over every single soldier and commander who was there, and then pray to whatever gods you have that it's enough." The word surrender felt like poison on Zirath's tongue. The Valoran Dominion has never surrendered. In 43 conquests we have never once. Then you will be annihilated, the ambassador cut in. The words just hung there in the air, cold and final. The humans won't stop. They can't. It's not in their nature. As long as a single one of your soldiers who took part in New Helsinki is still breathing, they will never stop fighting. And even if you found a way to beat their current fleet, the Korvathi delegate added with a grim nod, they would just build another, and another, and another. They will keep coming until one of you is wiped from existence. I've looked at the projections. Even if you won every single battle from this day forward, the humans would still win the war. They have more people. Their industrial power is greater. And their will to fight, it's endless. But the most important thing, the Denari ambassador chimed in, is that they have absolutely nothing left to lose. You stole everything from them when you hit New Helsinki. You stole their innocence, their feeling of safety, their belief that they could live peacefully in this galaxy. Now they know the truth, she continued, and knowing it has turned them into something that simply cannot be stopped. The vote was over in a flash. It was unanimous. No one would be sending aid to the Valoran Dominion. Every species would stay strictly neutral. As the delegates began to leave the chamber, the Denari ambassador walked over to Zirath. "I told you this would happen," she said softly. 2 years ago. I warned you. You really should have listened." And with that, she turned and walked away. Zirath stood all alone in the vast, silent chamber. The living crystal walls above him glowed with a soft blue light, completely indifferent to his despair. He had come here seeking a lifeline. All he found was a death sentence. The galaxy had spoken. The Valoran Dominion would have to face the humans alone. Aboard the human flagship, the Remembrance, Elena Vasquez heard the news from the council with a grim sense of satisfaction. They turned them down, Captain Torres reported. Every last species voted against getting involved. The Valorans are on their own. Elena gave a slow nod. It's what I figured would happen. Nobody wants to paint a target on their own back. A few of the other species even sent us private messages of support. The Denari ambassador in particular seems to really despise the Valorans. She tried to warn them before the attack. I saw the transcript. Elena's voice seemed to come from far away, lost in thought. She told them about our history, about what we become when we're pushed. They just wouldn't listen. She turned her gaze to the tactical map. The human fleet was cloaked, waiting right on the edge of Valoran space, poised for the final assault. 2 long years of fighting had led them to this moment. 2 years of blood, tears, and sacrifice. What are our losses? She asked. Torres looked down at his data pad. Total casualties since the war began. 412,000 military personnel, 63,000 civilians. We've lost 1,247 ships. Almost 500,000 souls gone, all to get justice for 12,000. Was it worth it? Elena knew what some people were saying. She'd heard the whispers back on Earth from those who questioned the war, who thought the price was just too high. They argued that humanity should have taken a peace deal. They called this endless fighting stubbornness, pride, nothing more than revenge. And maybe they had a point. But then she glanced down at the drawing she held in her hand, 4 little stick figures under a bright yellow sun, a family that would never be whole again. And she knew, deep in her bones, that stopping was never an option. The Valorans are digging in for their final defense, Torres went on. Intel says they've pulled every ship they have back to their home world. They're planning to make their last stand right there. Then that's where we'll finish it, Elena said, standing and straightening her uniform. Signal the fleet. We move on my mark at dawn. All ships prepare for full combat. Yes, ma'am. As Torres hurried off to give the orders, Elena walked over to the massive observation window and stared out into the sea of stars. Somewhere in that darkness was Valoria Prime, the heart of the empire that had murdered her people, the home of a species that thought it could attack humanity and face no consequences. They were wrong. In just a few days, this war would be over, one way or another. Elena shut her eyes, and all she could see was Sophia, her little girl with dark curly hair and a smile missing a front tooth. The little girl who died before she ever really got to live. We're almost there, sweetie, she whispered. I promised you, and I'm keeping my promise. When she opened her eyes again, they were as hard and cold as the void outside. She was finished with mourning, finished with second-guessing, finished with wondering if she was doing the right thing. The Valorans had started this war, but she was going to be the one to end it. Across the galaxy, on countless ships and in countless homes, other species were watching. They watched the human fleet mass for its final attack. They watched the Valoran defenses swell. They watched 2 civilizations brace for a final clash that would decide the fate of this entire corner of space. And they were learning. They were learning that humans weren't the soft, weak species they had always assumed. They were learning that attacking human civilians, especially their children, was the single worst mistake any species could ever make. They were learning that humans don't forget, they don't forgive, and they don't stop. Most of all, they were learning a new kind of fear. Not the fear of being conquered or of being enslaved. It was the fear of waking up something that should have been left to sleep. It was the fear of provoking a species that would hunt you across the stars for generations, if that's what it took. The humans had a special word for it. The intelligence files said they called it a grudge, an injury that is never forgotten and is always repaid, no matter how long it takes. The galaxy had witnessed countless wars. It had seen empires rise and crumble. It had seen species battle over territory, resources, and power, but it had never seen any species fight like this. With this much focus, this much intensity, this absolute refusal to settle for anything less than total victory. The humans were terrifying. Not because of their strength, but because of their will. They just would not stop. They could not stop. They would fight until they had won, or until every last one of them was dead. And the Valorans were about to get that lesson taught to them up close and personal. On 1,000 different worlds, among 100 different species, the same thought took hold. Never attack the humans. Never threaten their families. Never give them a reason to come for you. Because if you do, there is no force in the known universe that can save you from what happens next. The humans were coming, and the entire galaxy held its breath. HFY Prime was on fire, not just from the weapons raining down from orbit, but from the light of 1,000 human ships, their engines burning like miniature suns as they descended into the atmosphere. For 2 days, the battle had raged above the planet. The Valoran Defense Fleet, the largest armada their empire had ever created, fought with the raw desperation of the damned. It wasn't nearly enough. Admiral Torv stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched his world burn. His ship was a wreck, its weapons gone, its engines sputtering. All around him, the shattered remains of his fleet floated in the silent dark, a monument to the failure of everything he'd ever known. 43 species. The Valoran Dominion had conquered 43 species during their centuries of expansion. They had forged an empire that spanned an entire sector of the galaxy. They truly believed they were invincible. That belief had lasted for exactly 2 years, 4 months, and 17 days. That's how long it took the humans to bring it all crashing down. "Admiral," his communications officer said weakly, "the humans are hailing us. They want to speak with you." Torv almost let out a bitter laugh. "They want to talk now, after they've burned everything to the ground?" They say they want to discuss the terms of surrender." "Our surrender," Torv snapped. "No, Admiral, theirs." Torv blinked all 4 of his eyes, completely baffled. "They are not offering to surrender, Admiral," the officer clarified, his voice trembling. "They are offering us the chance to surrender before things get worse." "Worse than this?" Torv stared at the officer for a long, silent moment. Then, against all odds, a tiny flicker of hope sparked within him. Maybe, just maybe, this could end without the complete extinction of his people. Perhaps the humans were finally willing to talk. "Patch them through," he commanded. The holographic display shimmered to life. The face that appeared was the one he'd seen in so many intelligence reports. Elena Vasquez, Supreme Commander of the Human Forces. She looked older than she had at the start of the war. There were streaks of gray in her dark hair and deep lines of exhaustion etched into her face. But her eyes were exactly the same, cold, resolute, and completely without mercy. "Admiral Torv," she said, her voice flat, "I'm sure you know why I'm calling. You want to discuss terms." "I want to end this war, on our terms," she corrected. "You have one opportunity to accept them. If you say no, we will continue this fight until there is absolutely nothing left of your civilization." Torv felt that last bit of hope wither and die. "And what are your terms?" he asked. "First," she said, "the complete and unconditional surrender of all Valoran military forces. Your fleet will be stripped, your armies will be confined, your war factories will be torn down. And second," she paused, letting the silence hang in the air, "every single person who took part in the attack on New Helsinki will be found and put on trial for crimes against humanity. That means you, Admiral. It means every officer in your command structure and every soldier who pulled a trigger that day. A chill ran down Torvex's spine. You're asking us to turn over our own people to be put to death? I didn't say put to death, Vasquez's voice cut back, sharp as glass. I said fair trials. We will present evidence. You will be allowed a defense. Those found guilty will be sentenced based on the severity of their actions. Death is on the table for those who orchestrated it. Prison time for those who just followed orders. But every one of them will answer for what they did. And if you refuse, she added, her tone dropping, we will take them by force, and I promise you that process will be far less pleasant. Torvex weighed his options, but the scale was empty on his side. His navy was a graveyard of floating metal. His world was blockaded. Human troops were already securing his capital cities, crushing the last pockets of resistance. Is there anything else? He finally managed to ask. Yes, there's one last thing. Vasquez's tough exterior seemed to crack for just a second, a flicker of deep pain crossing her face. The names, all 12,000 people who died on New Helsinki, you will learn every single one. Every Valoran will learn them. It will be taught in your schools. It will be carved into your monuments. For the rest of your civilization's history, you will remember what you did and the price that was paid. He was stunned. You want us to memorize the names of everyone we killed? I want you to remember them, she clarified. I want your children to remember them. And I want their children's children to remember them 1,000 years from today. New Helsinki will never, ever be forgotten. Because the moment your people forget, the second you start to believe that what happened was somehow justifiable or that you could do it again without consequence, that is the very moment we will come back. She leaned in, her eyes locking onto his. Do you see what I'm telling you, Admiral? We aren't wiping you out because we refuse to become you. We don't execute civilians. We don't burn down colonies. We engage the soldiers who stand against us, and when the battle is done, we stop. That's the line between us and you. But you will never be allowed to forget, and neither will we. Every child on Earth will learn about New Helsinki. They will know what the Valorans did and what we were forced to do in return. That is how we guarantee this never happens again. Memory. It's the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. Torvex stood there, the weight of her words crushing him. After a long silence, he finally, bowed his head. We accept your terms, he said, his voice hollow. The Valoran Dominion surrenders. 3 days later, the surrender ceremony was held in the Grand Plaza of HFY Prime's capital. The city was damaged, but standing. The human forces had been surgical, avoiding civilian casualties wherever possible. They had hit military targets, government centers, and fortified positions. Not apartment buildings, not schools, not hospitals. The difference between this and what had happened to New Helsinki was a screaming accusation. Elena Vasquez stood in the middle of the plaza, flanked by human soldiers in their stark black and gray armor. Across from her, Admiral Torvex and what was left of the Valoran High Command were on their knees, the traditional stance of the defeated. Their weapons were piled at their feet. Their heads were bowed. And floating above them all, a colossal hologram displayed 12,000 faces, scrolling slowly, one after the other. Each portrait came with a name, an age, and a single humanizing detail. Sophia, age 7, loved to draw monsters. Anders, age 42, was helping build the colony's first library. Maria, age 39, was famous for the stew she brought to every neighborhood potluck. Eric, age 2, had just taken his first steps. The faces kept scrolling as Vasquez began to speak. We are here today to mark the end of a war that should never have happened. 2 years ago, the Valoran Dominion launched an unprovoked attack on a peaceful human settlement. They murdered 12,000 people, 4,000 of whom were children. They thought we would break and surrender." She let the silence stretch. They were wrong. She gestured up at the endless stream of faces. "These are the victims of New Helsinki. They were farmers, teachers, and doctors. They were mothers, fathers, and sons and daughters. They didn't die on a battlefield. They weren't fighting for some grand cause or glorious conquest. They died in their own homes, in their classrooms, and in their beds. They died because the Valoran Dominion decided their lives were meaningless." Her gaze shifted, landing directly on Torvex. "Admiral Torvex, you were in command of the fleet that annihilated New Helsinki. You gave the order to fire on civilian population centers. You are responsible for the deaths of 12,000 innocent souls." "I understand," Torvex whispered, his voice barely a sound. "Do you?" she challenged. "Do you really understand what you've done? Can you look at those faces and truly feel the weight of what was lost?" Torvex slowly lifted his head, his 4 eyes focused on the holographic memorial. He watched the faces drift by. Sophia with a big, gap-toothed grin. Anders with dirt under his fingernails from a day spent in his garden. Maria, caught in a moment of laughter at something just out of frame. Little Eric, reaching up for his mother's hands. And in that moment, something inside the Admiral shattered. For the very first time, he wasn't seeing numbers on a casualty report or acceptable losses for a military objective. He was seeing people. Real people who had lived real lives with real families. People who would never grow old, never fall in love, never watch another sunrise. His voice broke. I didn't know them. I never thought of them as people. They were just a number, an obstacle to be cleared. And now? Torvex looked at the faces again, and tears began to pour from all 4 of his eyes. Now I see them. Now I understand. He lowered his head completely, his body shaking with sobs. I'm so sorry. I know that means nothing. I know my words can't bring a single one of them back, but I am truly deeply sorry for what I did. Vasquez observed him for a long moment before giving a slow, deliberate nod. Your apology has been noted, Admiral. But an apology is not enough. Words can't rebuild cities. Words can't resurrect the dead. Only actions matter now, and memory and remembrance. She turned, her voice rising to address the crowd of Valorans watching the ceremony. As per the terms of surrender, every single Valoran will learn the names of the dead of New Helsinki. Your children will be taught their stories in school. Their names will be etched into your monuments. Your public ceremonies will honor their memory for the rest of your history. You will carry this burden, not as a punishment, but as a solemn responsibility. This is the price of your actions, and this is our guarantee that it will never, ever happen again. She turned back to the kneeling Admiral. Admiral Torvex, you will stand trial for war crimes. So will every officer who served under your command. If you are found guilty, you will accept the sentence of the court. That is justice. But the killing stops today. No more Valorans will die because of what happened at New Helsinki. Your civilians are safe. Your culture will be preserved. Your species will go on. We did not come here for your destruction. We came here to make certain you would never forget. She took a step closer to Torvex, her voice dropping to a near whisper, so only he could hear. I wanted you dead. For 2 years I have dreamed of killing you myself. I've imagined my hands closing around your throat and watching the life drain from your eyes. It would have been easy. It would have felt so good. Torvex looked up, his face stained with tears, and waited for the end. But then I'd think about Sophia, the little girl whose drawing I've carried with me since this war began. She was 7 years old. She drew pictures of her family and her pet. There wasn't an ounce of hate in her heart. All she wanted was to be happy and safe and loved. Vasquez's voice grew soft with sorrow. And I had to ask myself, what would she want? Would she want more killing, more revenge, more children left without parents, more families shattered by war? She shook her head slowly. No, she would want peace. She would want the fighting to end. She would want us to be better than the people who hurt her. She stepped away from him. So that's what we're going to do. We will be better. We will show you the mercy that you never showed us. We will spare lives where you only took them, not because you've earned it, but because we refuse to become what you are. She turned her back on him. The war is over. Remember why we fought it, and remember what it cost. That message was broadcast across the galaxy 1 week later. It was sent to every species, every planet, and every ship at the exact same moment. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a list of demands. It was a simple, clear statement, delivered in the calm, steady voice of the human Supreme Commander. We are humanity. 2 years ago, one of our colonies was attacked by a hostile power. They massacred 12,000 of our people, including thousands of children. They assumed we would surrender in fear. We did not. Instead, we fought back. We fought for 2 long years, across a dozen star systems. We lost nearly 500,000 of our own soldiers, but in the end, we were victorious. Not because we were cruel, and not through genocide, but through sheer determination, unbreakable unity, and an absolute refusal to ever give up. The war is over. The Valoran Dominion has surrendered. Their leaders will face justice. Their people will be made to remember what they have done, and we will ensure this can never happen again. To every other species in this galaxy, hear this message. We do not want conquest. We are not building an empire. All we want is to live in peace, to see the stars, and to build a safe future for our children. If you leave us in peace, we will leave you in peace. If you want to trade, our ports are open. If you offer us friendship, we will gladly accept it. But if you attack us, if you threaten our homes, if you dare to harm our children, then you need to know this. There is no corner of this galaxy deep enough to hide in. There is no force strong enough to protect you from what will come for you. We are humanity. We remember everything, and we do not forgive. The final transmission cut to black, and across the galaxy, 1,000 different species who had watched the war from a safe distance had to ask themselves what they had just seen. They'd watched a species they thought was weak and primitive become the most terrifying force in the cosmos. They saw the Valoran Dominion, a galactic empire that had conquered 43 species, get completely dismantled in a little over 2 years. And they all learned the lesson the Valorans paid for in blood. You never, ever attack humanity. You never threaten their children, and you never give them a reason to hunt you down. Because if you do, they will come for you. They will find you, and they will never, ever stop. On the bridge of the Starship Remembrance, Elena Vasquez stood at the main view screen, looking out at the endless sea of stars. The war was over. Justice had been served. The galaxy had finally learned to fear humanity, but she knew the terrible cost of that lesson. In her hands, she held a child's drawing. The paper was worn so thin you could almost see through it after being held and folded for 2 long years. 4 little stick figures still held hands beneath a bright yellow sun. A perfect, happy family, frozen in a moment right before their world was shattered by warships, fire, and greed. "I kept my promise," she whispered, her voice barely a breath in the quiet of the bridge. "I brought them justice." She clutched the drawing tighter. I just hope it was enough." The stars offered no reply. They just burned in the silent darkness, cold, distant, and forever. Elena carefully folded the drawing and tucked it into her pocket. Then she turned away from the stars and walked off the bridge, ready to leave the war behind her. But she would never forget what happened at New Helsinki. Nobody would, not the humans, who would carry the memory of their dead across the stars for centuries. Not the broken Valoran Empire, who would teach the names of the Avengers to every new generation as a warning. And not the galaxy, which would now remember, forever, that humanity was never the prey in the food chain. They were the predators. They had just been woken up.